So I was engaging in a conversation with mostly Google Gemini or Google AI this time, and talking about righteousness and some of the output does go into um, how righteousness is covered in the Christian scriptures. Although I was trying to focus on righteousness in the Hebrew Tanakh and amongst Jews living today. Um, so, out of fairness and honesty, because the conversation does tend to wander into the Christian scriptures, I'll have to cover that. And but I will admit up front that I'm biased towards the Jewish perspective. And I was looking at this to see whether the charge could be made that Christianity consolidates righteousness in in a specific person, the person of Jesus Christos, instead of allowing individual people to be considered righteous um, on their own merits. Now, I think any Christian right off the bat would see and recognize that Christianity has a problem with the idea that individual people might be considered righteous on their own merits. So anyway, let's begin. So I ask it, how many times does either the singular or plural form of tzaddik, meaning a righteous one or a righteous person, occur in reference to a human being in the Hebrew Tanakh? And it answers, the Hebrew word tzaddik, including its singular, plural, and suffixed forms, occurs exactly 206 times in the Westminster Leningrad Codex of the Hebrew Tanakh. Because the vast majority of these instances describe human beings rather than God, the word is used in reference to humans approximately 170 to 180 times. So what this shows is that there were, contrary to Christian polemics in the New Testament, that there were individuals who were considered righteous long before Jesus Christos was allegedly crucified. Distribution by context. The 206 total occurrences are divided, and these could be, these figures could be errors because Google Gemini especially tends to make errors. Lately, it's been a lot better than it had been, say, a year ago. So maybe it's been fixed, but I still caution people on these exact figures because they are being given by artificial intelligence. The 206 total occurrences are divided between descriptions of human behavior, collective human groups, abstract archetypes, and the character of God. Human beings, approximately 170 to 180 times, used to describe specific people such as Noah in Genesis chapter 6 verse 9, hypothetical righteous citizens such as Abraham's plea for Sodom, or general righteous people juxtaposed against the wicked, Reshaim, like wicked ones. Like if someone calls you Rasha, like someone from the Jewish community calls you a Rasha. That's, I think that's just about the worst insult that could be leveled against you. I mean, they really do not think very highly of you at all if they call you a Rasha. So the divine, approximately 25 to 30 times, is used directly as an adjective to describe God's absolute justice and righteousness. For example, the Lord is righteous, he loves righteous deeds in Psalms chapter 11, verse 7, or righteous art thou, O Lord, in Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 1. Book by book breakdown. The word tzaddik is highly concentrated in the wisdom literature and poetic books of the Hebrew Bible. Psalms 51 occurrences frequently used to contrast the fate, protection, and prayers of the righteous against the wicked. Proverbs 66 occurrences serves as the primary moral archetype alongside the chacham, a wise person, outlining daily ethical behavior, financial honesty, and speech. Job 17 occurrences central to the book's core debate regarding why a tzaddik suffers. The prophets, 45 occurrences, scattered heavily throughout Isaiah, Ezekiel, Habakkuk, I'm not sure how it's exactly pronounced. I'm not very good with my stresses or tenses. And Malachi to demand societal justice and describe the righteous remnant. The Torah, 16 occurrences, appears rarely in narrative prose, notably used for Noah, Abraham's negotiation over Sodom, or Sodom, I think, and laws forbidding the condemnation of an innocent person. And then it asked me if I'd like to explore certain things further. So I ask it to provide the exact verses where specific biblical figures like Noah are called a tzaddik, or tzaddik. In the text of the Hebrew Tanakh, Noah is the only specific historical individual explicitly labeled a tzaddik. Other major figures like Abraham, Moses, and David are praised for doing tzedakah, righteous acts, but and these days, like, tzedakah is often used to refer to doing acts of charity. So, but in this use, it seems to be like a more generalized, more fitting use to describe any acts or works or deeds of righteousness or good deeds. Says, but Noah alone receives the title itself, and but I think it says of Noah he was righteous in his generation. And the way that's sometimes interpreted is that, like, his generation was so bad that what he did exemplified him as a righteous person, because the bar was very low at the time. To me, this almost seems like an attempt to minimize the righteousness of Noah, because of how Noah, it's his covenant that's typically attributed to being incumbent upon non-Jews. Like, non-Jews are required to fulfill commandments that come from the covenant with Noah. And like saying that Noah was righteous in his generation, it's like saying Noah was righteous in his Gentile generation. Like Noah was righteous amongst the Gentiles. And so it follows that, well, how righteous are Gentiles? It's like pretty easy to be regarded as righteous amongst Gentiles. So, but nevertheless, the text of the Hebrew Tanakh does apparently solely identify Noah as a tzaddik. Um, It says, these in Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, and Ish tzaddik, blameless in his generations. Noah walked with God. I think that, I don't know what the interpretation or commentary is on Noah walked with God, but at its face, it sounds like he's someone who was allowed to enjoy God's company, in that they walked together. Or you might think of it like a disciple with their teacher. I mean, just to be allowed to be a student of a teacher of righteousness is somewhat of an honor itself, unless it was seen that he was so needy of instruction that he was taken in as a charity case pupil. I don't know. Genesis chapter 7, verse 1, and the Lord said to Noah, come, you and all your household, into the ark, for you have seen righteous, for you I have seen righteous before me in this generation. Sorry about that. My eyes are my eyesight's starting to get blurry, and I'm not wearing glasses because I usually only use them for driving. But I noticed lately when I've been trying to read that the letters are getting blurry. The future Messianic king. In the latter prophets, the future Davidic king, the Messiah, is explicitly given the title tzaddik as a defining attribute of his character and rule. Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, or Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king comes to you. He is righteous and victorious, lowly, and riding upon, it says, riding upon an donkey, or maybe it should be a donkey. But anyway, the New Testament apparently gets the Hebrew of this passage wrong, and that's why it thinks that there's actually two animals involved in this, rather than one. So, and the way it's portrayed, it's almost like Jesus is doing it in order to fulfill a messianic prophecy. Like he's not just doing something and then someone's realizing that it's in fulfillment of a messianic prophecy. Rather, he does it because he already knows about the messianic prophecy, so he does it in order to fulfill that prophecy. Is it still fulfilled? That's a question. Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 5. Behold, days are coming, says the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous shoot, Tzemach Tzaddik, and he shall reign as king and prosper, and he shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. Unnamed individuals and specific groups. The word is used as a specific legal or descriptive title for literal people who are innocent of a crime or victimized in a historical event. The slain leaders, Abner and Ishbosheth, in 2 Samuel chapter 4, verse 11. King David uses the plural form when condemning the assassins who murdered King Saul's son Ishbosheth. How much more when wicked men have slain a righteous man and Ish Tzaddik in his own house upon his bed. The innocent victim in Exodus chapter 23, verse 7, the Torah establishes a legal mandate for judges regarding a person falsely accused in court. Keep far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous, Tzaddik, do not slay, for I will not justify the wicked. And Abraham's hypothetical citizens, during his famous negotiation with God over the fate of Sodom, Abraham uses the term to describe specific literal people he believes might be living inside the city gates. Genesis chapter 18, verse 24, perhaps there are 50 righteous tzaddikim within the city. Will you actually sweep it away and not forgive the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in it? And I'd like to skip over to that, because that does bring up a concept in Judaism. Let's see. So here it says, peradventure, that's the King James Version, peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city, which I love to hear it when I watch the New Media Bible. I don't mind hearing the King James Version there as narration for the, like in this case, Abraham, who's played by Topol, who played Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. Here he's speaking in Hebrew in the New Media Bible, but there's a King James Version narration over it. But here he says 50, and then, yeah, I'll spare it for 50's sake, for 50 tzaddikim in the city. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking, wilt thou destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. That's interesting. It doesn't, I don't think it quite reads that way in the King James Version. At least it's not as clear. Then he says, what about 40? And he says, I will not do it. Oh, and then he says 30, and he says, I'll not do it if I find 30 there. And then, how about 20? Please don't be angry. Suppose 10 are found there. For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. And the Lord went his way. And that was the end of the conversation. And from this, we get the concept of 10 righteous men in Judaism, which, you know, in Judaism, you have to have 10 men for minyan, for prayer, for communal prayer. In Judaism, 10 righteous men, so 10 tzaddikim, refers famously to the number of righteous individuals Abraham pleaded for to save the wicked city of Sodom. This foundational concept that a small collective group of the righteous holds the power to sustain a community also gave rise to the minyan, the quorum of 10 required for communal prayer. While there is no fixed roster of 10 specific men known universally as the 10 righteous, Jewish tradition highlights this number across several major contexts. Well, so my understanding is that you have to have 10 righteous men in a city to preserve it from destruction. Now, I'm not sure if, I should know this, but I don't exactly know the precise location. Was Sodom located within the borders of biblical Israel? Because I'm trying to figure out whether Sodom is a Gentile city or of course, it would still be, I guess, a Gentile city, but a Gentile city within the borders of biblical Israel, which would kind of, I think, put it on a different operational level than a Gentile city. So the Jordan Valley served as the eastern border of the land of Canaan, but we know that there were 2.5 tribes that were east of the Jordan. So the southern theory says that it was on the outer edge of the promised land. The northern theory, Sodom would actually lie outside the historical borders of biblical Israel proper, falling into ancient Moab or Edom. So, but my question is, like, and maybe I should ask it here after I cover this. The righteous of Sodom in Genesis. While God revealed his plan to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham famously negotiated to save the cities. He started with 50 and bargained down, eventually asking if God would spare the cities if just 10 righteous men could be found there. God agreed, establishing the idea that the merit of 10 good people can protect an entire society. The 9 who entered heaven alive. This is a Talmudic tradition. Extending from the idea of special righteous figures, Derech Eretz Zuta, a minor tractate of the Babylonian Talmud, lists 9 specific historical figures who were so extraordinarily righteous that they entered paradise, the Garden of Eden, without ever experiencing physical death. That's Enoch, Hanoch, Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eleazar, Abraham's servant, Ebed Melech the Cushite, Jabez, Bethia, daughter of Pharaoh, Sarah, daughter of Asher, Joshua ben Levi, and 9, the Messiah. The 36 hidden righteous, Lamed Vavniks, LLV, Lamed Vavniks. Huh. I don't know what that LV means. Closely tied to the concept of the righteous preserving the world is the Kabbalistic and Talmudic legend of the Lamed Vav Tzaddikim, the 36. Oh, okay, so that's the number, Lamed Vav. Tradition teaches that in every generation there are at least 36 hidden righteous individuals. Because their identities are completely unknown to the world and even to themselves, they are known as the hidden righteous, the Tzaddikim Nistarim. Nistarim, that must be like I wonder if that's like the word Mistarivim. Mistaravim? They were like undercover military units in the Israeli army. Their collective righteousness is the sole merit upon which God sustains the existence of the world. The minyan, the communal quorum, because of the significance of 10 righteous people in averting disaster in Sodom, the number 10 evolved into the fundamental quorum required for Jewish communal prayer, known as a minyan. In traditional Judaism, a minyan consists of 10 adult males, while some egalitarian movements count 10 adult individuals. If you're looking, okay, anyway. So, but anyway, my thought on this is that if 10 righteous men are necessary to preserve even a Gentile city from destruction, then you would think that that Gentiles who claim to fear God would want to foster a community that could produce 10 righteous men in order to preserve their own communities from destruction. But I don't think most Gentiles know about this concept, much less would it even occur to them to go to those measures. Anyway, so back to this. So up here it mentioned this term, Tzemach Tzedek, a righteous shoot, and then I remembered that there was a person who's called the Tzemach Tzedek, and so this apparently, I assume this must be the grandfather of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who also apparently had the same name. So Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch from 1789 to 1866, known as the Tzemach Tzedek, was the third Rebbe of Chabad. An outstanding Torah scholar and prolific writer, he fostered warm relations with other Torah giants of his time and produced authoritative responsa on many areas of Jewish law. His contribution to Hasidic thought was marked by innovative contextualization and synthesis, and the melodies he composed span the spectrum of human emotion and experience. During his leadership, Chabad flourished, swelling to hundreds of thousands of Hasidim, or in other words, Hasidic Jews, or Jews who emphasize merciful treatment, merciful or gracious or kind treatment of others. So then I ask it, was the Tzemach Tzedek named as a fulfillment of Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 5? No, he was not named as a direct fulfillment of the prophecy, but his honorary title is intimately connected to it. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson was given the moniker Tzemach Tzedek, meaning righteous sprout, by the Jewish community long after his birth. The name, he was born Rabbi Menachem Mendel. The origin, the title was adopted later in life, derived directly from the major halachic and theologic work he authored, which was titled Tzemach Tzedek. The connection, the title itself, is an allusion to the messianic verse in Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 5, which states, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, the Tzemach Tzaddik." So, because the numerical value, gematria, of the human name Menachem corresponds to Tzemach, and Mendel corresponds to Tzedek, his followers recognize the phrase from Jeremiah as a fitting title reflecting his immense scholarship and messianic hope. Read more about his legacy and his encyclopedic encyclopedic responsa on Chabad.org. Then I asked, did the Tzemach Tzedek ever refer to himself as a tzaddik while he lived, as a righteous one? Did his followers ever refer to him as a tzaddik while he lived? And the response, no, he never referred to himself as a tzaddik, but yes, his followers absolutely did during his lifetime. His self-perception, in line with traditional Chabad philosophy, and extreme personal humility, the Tzemach Tzedek would never have claimed to be a tzaddik, a completely righteous person. The Tanya's definition, the Tanya is a work of Kabbalistic teaching. And some people, they, especially Christians and probably Karaite Jews, who have this self-contradictory position that only the written Torah is authoritative and binding and reliable for Jewish life. Never mind that they have plenty of their own extra biblical ideas and works of literature and customs and practice. So that's why I say self-contradictory. But mostly Christians and Karaites would object to any work of Jewish literature that is not the Hebrew Tanakh. How the Karaites arrive at which books of the Hebrew Tanakh and beyond, because there are other works of Jewish religious literature from the same time periods that are not included in the canon of the Hebrew Tanakh, but how the Karaites arrive at the canon of the Hebrew Tanakh and how it is mirrored with this very same canon that the rabbis, the descendants of the Pharisees, hold. How they arrived at that, I have no idea. Because they say, well, we can't lean upon any work of Jewish literature that's outside, or even oral Torah that's outside of the written Hebrew Tanakh. So basically, I think they must have the attitude that Christians do about their scriptures, that because it's in my hands, this must be what God has approved. Completely turning a blind eye or one's horse blinders to the fact that there was a whole historical process by which that canon of scripture you have in your hands got into your hands. Anyway, we'll continue. That's some side tangent. The Tanya's definition, his grandfather, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, defined a tzaddik in the foundational Chabad text, the Tanya, as someone who has completely eliminated or transformed their innate animal soul and desires no evil whatsoever. To claim this status publicly was viewed as a profound violation of humility. In the Tzemach Tzedek's own writings, in his extensive personal correspondence and responsa, he signed his name with standard self-effacing rabbinic acronyms like Ein Kof. What was that? I of something? Oh, just letters, I guess. Standing for Anachnu Ketsanim, meaning we who are small, or simply as a servant of God. His followers, Hasidim, and the broader Jewish world unquestionably referred to him as a tzaddik while he was alive. The role of the Rebbe in Hasidism, the spiritual leader, the Rebbe is fundamentally understood to be the tzaddik, and I think this must be an AI hallucination, because it says had invasion. Let me see if I can. What is the Hebrew term for the tzaddik of the generation? Tzaddik Hador. So here it got it right as far as the ha, but then it added the D to make it had, and then it just messed this up. I don't know what's going on here. So the Tzaddik Hador, I'm going to correct that. So in Hasidism, the spiritual leader, the Rebbe, is fundamentally understood to be the Tzaddik Hador, the tzaddik of the generation, who serves as a spiritual conduit for his community. Contemporary accounts. While he lived, his followers routinely addressed him in letters and speech using highly elevated titles reserved strictly for holy figures. They referred to him using terms like Admor, an acronym for our master, our teacher, our Rebbe, and explicitly spoke of him as the tzaddik whose prayers and blessings carried divine weight. If you would like to explore further, I can share details on how he managed his community's reverence, or explain how Chabad defines the difference between a tzaddik or an ordinary person. Now, some people, I think, would object to this idea that somebody, that a righteous man, that his prayers could have heavier weight. His prayers and blessings carried divine weight, or could have heavier weight than the prayers of just anyone, even like the prayers of a sinner, like in the Christian scriptures, when it tries to elevate the quality of the prayers of a sinner versus the prayers of a righteous person. But then consider how the Christian tzaddik, Jesus Christos, how his prayers are considered to have more divine weight or heavier weight than that of even the sinner, or of the righteous Pharisee or Sadducee or scribe, right? And in fact, I think that's kind of lost in Christianity, probably not so much in Catholicism, because I think Catholicism sometimes has a better grasp on the liturgical aspects of Christianity than Protestants do, because Protestants tend to be anti-liturgy. So I think Catholic Christians would understand how the prayer of Jesus Christos would be of heavier weight. So they don't mind it if it's the Christian tzaddik, but they don't mind his prayers having more weight, but they do mind a righteous Jewish person having weightier prayers than a sinner of the Gentiles. So Let's see. So then I move on to the last Rebbe of Chabad, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose name was also apparently Mendel Menachem Schneerson. And I asked, did he ever refer to himself as a tzaddik while he lived, or did his followers ever refer to him as a tzaddik while he lived? And it says, no, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, never referred to himself as a tzaddik, but yes, his followers universally did during his lifetime. This dynamic perfectly mirrors that of his ancestor, the Tzemach Tzedek, driven by the exact same theological guidelines and intense personal humility. The Rebbe's self-perception in public addresses and written correspondence. The Rebbe went to extreme lengths to deflect personal honor. The Tanya's standard, like all Chabad Rebbes, he was steeped in the Tanya, which states that a true tzaddik has entirely eradicated their personal ego and evil inclination. To claim to be a tzaddik would be a direct expression of ego, creating a paradox. Now, I personally, I get it. Like this kind of aversion towards ego. But it seems like ego, the I, the personal identity of a person, tends to get equated with like Greek hubris or pride. And yet when the Creator reveals his name in the Hebrew, the way it's translated over in the Torah, in the Septuagint, let's see, and I should show you this rather than just talking about it. So Exodus chapter 3, and this is Moses talking to the Creator, and when I think he's talking about the Egyptians, when they shall say to me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them? No, I'm sorry. When I come unto the children of Israel and say unto them. I think there is a passage where Moses does talk about the Creator's name to the Egyptians, but it's not in these verses right here. And I say unto them, the God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, what is his name, and what shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. Now recently, Dan McClellan put out a video about this, saying that this is not saying I am. But so the word is 1961 in Hebrew, but it's not spelled exactly Haya in the text. It says that this is a primitive root, meaning was, come to pass, came, has been, were, happened before, become, pertained, better, for thee. From a primitive root, 1933, which is Hava. Be thou, be, shall be, may be, hath. And this is from two primitive roots. Excuse me. No, it says that this is a primitive root, and then it says to compare a couple other words. So But if we look at how this is translated, I don't know Greek, so I don't know why I'm looking like this. I can do this, and here's the LXX. I'm looking for ego eimi, and I'm not sure that I'm seeing it right off the bat. So hold on a second. Let me jump over to um, got to find the actual place that it happens in the I am as a name, New Testament. There it is, ego eimi, but where bread of life, light of the world, gate for the sheep, good shepherd, resurrection, way, truth, and life. We're looking for before Abraham was I am, John 8:58. John 8:58. So right here, and then we want the Greek. So verily I say unto you, before Abraham was I am. So there's ego. Okay, so it almost looks like the word you in Greek, like a female sheep, and then a me. So now if I go back here, there it is. Now that seems to happen fairly early in the verse. I am that I am. So it doesn't seem to fit that same pattern, I am that I am, in the Greek. And then it doesn't seem to repeat a third time saying, I am has sent me to you. I'm just not seeing it. Interesting. So anyway, what I was getting at was that even in the Septuagint, which legend has it is supposed to be this inspired Greek translation of the Torah, the creator is identified as ego eimi, I am. So if the creator is referred to as ego, I, that he has a personal identity, then why would it be so sinful for a human being to have an ego, a personal identity? It just seems to be like later this later taboo kind of that we've imposed upon ourselves because we don't want to look like we're self-centered. But the pure fact of the matter is, as human beings, we are self-centered. Our whole reality, our whole perception of the reality of the universe around us does center right on us. The farther away you get from yourself, the more unreal things become because of the time it takes both for light and for sound to travel to you, so that what you're perceiving becomes more unreal with distance. So reality does center upon us. Things are centered upon ourselves. This is just the reality of like the laws of physics, how things work in our universe. So I don't think it's like such a sin to operate that way, to realize that, hey, this is my identity, this is who I am. Obviously, like, there are commandments that the children of Israel are supposed to obey. And I guess ideally, like, all of the children of Israel would obey all of the commandments perfectly. But then I would imagine that there are aspects of daily living that aren't covered by the Torah or by Jewish oral tradition. But even then, the way the sages talk in the Mishnah and the Talmud is like they are trying to see how the Torah applies to every aspect of daily life. But it would be hard to imagine that the product of this, ideally, would be that every child of Israel would exactly resemble every other child of Israel. We would call that like a an industrial line or an assembly line of robots. At least from the Gentile perspective, that is how we would think of that. The Jewish community may think of it differently. I don't know. But, I recall how different sages in the Talmud have their own different personalities or idiosyncrasies or things about them that would make them peculiar. Like there was one sage or rabbi who didn't drink much wine because I think it gave him a headache. And I experienced the same kind of things with alcohol. I don't enjoy alcohol at all. So so I specifically remembered that because I identified with it somewhat. So, but anyway, getting back to Hasidism, this apparently is the teaching of the Talmud about ego. Is you want a cessation of the ego. So let's see. Understanding the term, instead of applying the title to himself, the Rebbe famously flipped the definition outward. On his 90th birthday, when asked about a reporter for a message to the world, he noted that the Hebrew letter for the number 90 is tzadi, which spells tzaddik. He used this to declare that every single person, both Jew and non-Jew, must become a true tzaddik by escalating their personal righteousness. I I didn't even know that. I knew that the Rebbe taught that non-Jews must obey the Noahide laws, but I did not know that the Rebbe asserted that a non-Jew must also become a true tzaddik. So here, contrary to the Christian position that Gentiles were somehow separated from God, here we see in Hasidic Judaism that a non-Jew apparently can become a true tzaddik, just, I guess, like Noah. Self-signature. In his vast letter-writing campaigns, he consistently signed his name simply as Menachem Mendel Schneerson, completely omitting titles of spiritual supremacy or saintliness. So rather than calling himself the Rebbe, or even acknowledging the fact that he was a rabbi, was qualified as a rabbi, he simply identified himself by his name. And I've seen Chabad rabbis do this also, where they identify themselves by their name. And when I've tried to be respectful to them by recognizing their qualifications and addressing them as rabbi, or that they would almost seem to be made uncomfortable by the fact that I refer to them as a rabbi. Now, I don't know if that's because, being a Gentile, maybe I wasn't considered one of their students, so maybe it was not appropriate for me to refer to them as rabbi, but it seems like it follows that in emulating their Rebbe, that they would be made uncomfortable by being referred to by titles, which is surprising to me. I was not aware of this for all these years that I had had contact with members of Chabad. His followers' perception: while the Rebbe fiercely deflected the title, his Hasidim and millions of people worldwide were openly referred to him as a tzaddik while he was alive. The Nasi, or leader of the generation. In Chabad philosophy, the leader of the generation, the Nasi Hador, is inherently the tzaddik. His followers viewed him as the spiritual epicenter of the Jewish world, possessing an extraordinary soul capable of channeling blessings and miracles. Spoken and written honor. In his presence, Hasidim also addressed him as the Rebbe, or Admor, our master teacher and Rebbe. In writing and prayer, they routinely referred to him as the Tzaddik. The Messianic fervor. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, this devotion intensified. Many followers openly identified him not just as a tzaddik, but as the potential Mashiach of the generation, a claim the Rebbe actively discouraged and often grew visibly upset by when sung or proclaimed directly to his face. And then I can provide more insight into how the Rebbe responded to followers who sang messianic chants to him, or I can share specific examples of his letters where he deflected personal praise. What would you like to explore next? So, anyway, that's something you could look up if you would like to. So then we're starting to get into the New Testament and how it translates the word tzaddik. So let's see if I've got something here. So whereas tzaddik is a different Hebrew Strong's number, the word that is translated from tzaddik in Hebrew into Greek is Greek Strong's number 1342. Dikaios, I guess. So you can look that up yourself, and you can see how that's used in the New Testament. But I want to stop here as a part one on this because it's getting pretty lengthy. And I can close these, and I can always get back to that. So anyway, so what we've shown is that there were people long before the alleged crucifixion of Jesus Christos who were referred to as righteousness, or referred to as righteous ones, Tzaddikim. Later, we'll show how there are people in the Christian scriptures who are referred to as Tzaddikim, even though Paul tries to act like this is something that just wasn't possible until, I guess, the crucifixion happened. Although I don't think he often uses the term crucifixion, as you might expect for someone who is so, whose theology is so centered around that event, alleged event, rather. So, anyway, I'll stop here, and I'll have to pick it up another time, I think.